Live from the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. There's only a few days like today in American history where society instantly shifts in a massive and tectonic way. When you know that in that very precise moment, things are never going to be the same and no one knows for sure how it's all going to settle out. So yes, I felt a little sick to my stomach today. As the father of two girls, I felt like they had been betrayed. Later riveted to national news feeds, I heard over and over how the U.S. Supreme Court had disposed of a half-century's worth of precedent and decided to repeal Roe versus Wade, thus destroying a right women had long held. It will now be up to individual states whether abortion services within their borders will be accessible or become a crime punishable by years in prison. Even though we had warning that this decision was in the offing through the leaked draft opinion from Justice Sam Alito, that foreknowledge did very little to mute the outrage coming from women all over this country. The other side, meanwhile, celebrated their decades of perseverance and their almost single-minded desire to make abortion illegal despite the majority's opposition. They say the arc of the moral universe is long and bends toward justice. Given the backsliding and political dithering we've seen so much of in recent years, one has to ask, justice for whom? And how bent is this arc? Any straight line bent too far will send us all wandering aimlessly around in ever-tightening circles. How do we change that dynamic? Our guest tonight may have some ideas. After a long period of wondering, we can now pretty safely say that our next 4th District Supervisor will be Natalie Arroyo, a fierce and proud advocate of strengthening women's rights and someone who will certainly have something to say about where we go from here. She represents a fresh infusion of diversity on a long-stayed Board of Supervisors, and we'll hear about her future plans and concerns as she prepares to take over her seat on the board. Now, just to be clear and make sure that we CYA, as they say, it hasn't been certified yet, right?
Correct. We're about a week out from that.
But the way that the vote totals have been moving, every time that they've done a count, your lead has increased, and it would be almost numerically impossible at this point for you to lose, to go below 50% and then require the runoff.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sitting just below 54%, and I've had to remind a lot of voters that in the primary for the supervisorial elections, if you get 50% plus one, that means it doesn't go to a runoff in November. So I'd be looking at not going to the general election and just taking office in January of 2023.
So you'd actually have 6 months to prepare yourself or
exactly.
whatever. Do some studying, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I plan to do a lot of listening sessions with community members. I really want to do my due diligence and really research, what people want to see. I've talked to a lot of folks at their doors and really spoken with a lot of community members about their concerns, but I want to do more of that now that it's clear, what the path forward will be.
Yeah. Before we get into some of the more general subjects, I did mention the Roe v. Wade decision, and there was a protest, which we have footage of, that's probably still going on right now at the Humboldt County Courthouse. Hundreds of people are down there, very loud and boisterously, expressing their opinions. Do you have any reaction to the fact that this long-established precedent has been overruled?
Yeah, I woke up this morning to the news and was pretty devastated. I knew it was coming, or I expected that it was coming, but it was a devastating decision. And thinking about living in California, we expect that these rights will be sustained in our state. But I've lived in Louisiana and Florida, and I really think that it's unlikely to be upheld. The rights to abortion are already very restricted, and will likely become more restricted in many states. So it's really important, I think, for people to get as politically active as possible if this is an important issue for them, and to not take lightly the progress that California plans to make. I know that we're looking at potentially changes to the state constitution to codify the right to abortion.
That's right. Yeah, an amendment.
Yeah.
Do you think, does this represent to you a larger sign of kind of where our country's headed? And if so, what can we do as private individuals to kind of head that off if we don't like where we see things going in terms of this kind of reactionary, move?
Absolutely. So I see this really representing a pretty big shift that I think will have other impacts down the line, perhaps impacts on marriage rights and other privacy impacts, healthcare impacts for people throughout the nation. So I think what I see it doing, and what really struck me today as I was reflecting on it, was it really feels like it's deepening the divides between states and making us more of a patchwork and less of a unified nation, where we protect, common rights throughout these United States. And as a member of the federal government in some ways, and having a federal capacity as well, it's really through the Coast Guard. I really think about what that means to me. Like, what does it mean to sign up to serve in domestic service? To me, it's about protecting the rights that we all have as community members, as well as the specific mission of the Coast Guard. But it's broader than that. It's about defending, what we have as a nation, together. Yeah. So I think that's been what struck me the most. I've already been through the kind of arc of anger and frustration and concern about the rights to reproductive health, and in hearing the leak. But today I was struck by that feeling of grief for our nation. Yeah.
For the first time, my daughters, woke up this morning with less rights than their mother had through her life, and her grandmother for the past 40 years, or their grandmother. What can we say to young girls now about how the country views them in the face of this?
Whew. That's a tough one. I mean, I will say, as someone in my mid to late 30s now, I can say that to the women and girls of our community and communities beyond, that I will do everything in my power to stick up for you. And I think that there are many people, many people like me. So, there are many of us who will get into office and fight for policies that are equitable, and really look at equity issues, broadly speaking, in local government, in state government, in the federal government. So there are many of us who are on their side, and who will look out for them and get them the access to care that they may need, and the access to resources that they may need.
Excellent. Sorry to throw that heavy stuff at
you
right away.
That's a tough one.
It's a huge issue.
It is, absolutely.
But your election has sort of been that kind of, an advent of fresh air and change and diversity on the Board of Supervisors, given that it holds. But basically, you're a woman of color, and you're coming onto the Board of Supervisors that's been white, as far as I know, forever, or at least close. And so how does it feel to break through that barrier, for one thing? And then how do you feel like your perspective will help the county do its work better?
Sure. So as far as I'm aware, I'm the first Latina to be elected to the Board of Supervisors. And again, that big caveat of, the election results haven't been certified, but probably elected, looking like it's going that way. And so I think that's really important. I have had, for example, I teach at Cal Poly Humboldt. I just teach one class typically as a lecturer there, but I have students every semester who sign up for my class who say that they specifically selected me, not because they thought I would give them any special preference, but just because they felt comfortable having a Latinx person teach them, and they felt a kinship, and they felt more welcome, and they were excited for that. So. Absolutely. A lot of students of color will specifically point that out, and I've also had folks say that about me serving in the city council, that it really means something to them and makes them feel like that door is open for them too. So in the future, I hope that will help people feel that they too could run for office or seek senior leadership positions, and that they have a lot to offer. And then I think it gives me just a little extra insight into what policies are crafted and how they include everybody in this community. And I've spent a lot of my work in the nonprofit sector here in Humboldt over the last 16 plus years, really thinking about equity issues as well. So I bring that to the table. Absolutely.
It's interesting. I mean, we've had a burgeoning Hispanic community. And I think that one of the ways that, our community has failed is, I think, building bridges and outreach to those communities to help sort of draw them in more into the processes of government and also into media. And I think that anything we can do to further that goal is worthwhile. I've tried on the show to have guests who can, to speak to that perspective, but I need to do more. So I have a list of several issues I want to talk to you about, sort of that are I kind of view as the the big kahunas of Humboldt County problems or whatever. One of those is addiction, high rates of addiction, and how that ties into ACEs. What are your thoughts on where the county is at now? Do you think that there's more that the county could do, sort of generally, or off the top of your head, that you'd like to see tried? Or do you think that under the leadership of First Five Humboldt and Marianne Hansen, the county is kind of doing what it can at this point?
I think there's always room to improve the access to resources for youth to try to mitigate for adverse childhood experiences. We know that that has a really significant impact on people's mental health, on behavioral health, and ultimately on addiction and substance use disorders. So, I think it's important to keep in perspective that when we talk about substance use, we're talking about healthcare. We're talking about a medical issue. And we do have some treatment programs that provide, medication-based treatment. It doesn't have to be exclusively abstinence-based, and that's important to acknowledge that there are other treatment options to help people who are ready for another alternative to move towards that. So continuing to partner with organizations that offer medication-based treatment, I think, is key, and continuing to partner with as many community-based groups. I think we need to really, First Five is wonderful. There's also, programs that are more culturally responsive and important for folks who are people of color, for Native community members, for our Black and Latinx community members. So I think, thinking about how to support youth in a culturally responsive way is really key, and continuing to build those partnerships. And thankfully, we're really rich with people who want to do good and with organizations that are community benefit organizations here in Humboldt. So I bring a lot of experience with that in the nonprofit sector here, and I've always thought about trying to kind of bridge boundaries and de-silo kind of our responses to different issues, whether it's environmental or social issues. So I think those are some, I know those are pretty words, and then actually, the reality of that is it's really hard because people have their work that they need to do, and anything beyond that is, it's a stretch.
Absolutely.
But I think setting that intention is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned in our last discussion we had on the show, we talked about how this is a rich community for nonprofits, and they cover the gamut. And so if the government can tap into those resources, I think that absolutely would be huge. On the addiction front, now you were with the city when the whole situation went down with the Hatcher. Right? How do you feel about how all that ended up? Did you feel like the county or the city handled that properly? And do you think that the county should be more proactive in forming that kind of a relationship with harm reduction groups, or what?
So the county offers their own harm reduction services through public health. And so there's always the need and the request to expand those services. So to the extent possible, I think we should, as a county, expand the hours and the availability of those services for folks. When it comes to Hatcher, those were, it continues to be challenging.
Sure.
As far as the community response. And I think they continue to have needs as an organization to meet their harm reduction goals. And so nobody's getting what they want right now. And I will say that, the city doesn't license or control the program. We simply, they operate in city limits. And so we've had to kind of go through the process of creating sideboards around that. And frankly, the current iteration of that program isn't what I would have selected, but it's what we're working with now. And so while it's been a really controversial issue, I will say that I do believe that having access to harm reduction resources does minimize the spread of disease, and that's really important to me. So continuing those services that the county provides and expanding those, I think, is probably one of the best avenues, because the county would have more control and be more able to respond to public concerns and needs.
Yeah, really thoughtful answer. And as a recovering addict, the harm reduction absolutely does save lives, and keeps people feeling like they're human beings because people care about them. And I think that's part of the most important strategy that should be pursued. And the Hatcher situation, to me, it seems like they caught a lot of negative attention from the community and maybe blame for some things that they weren't responsible for. I'm not saying that they were blameless, but anyway, thoughtful answer. Thank you for that. One of the issues that you raised during the campaign was housing stock. And I've covered this issue for years through housing update, housing element updates and everything else. And it's a perennial challenge of how you provide the appropriate number of units per, economic group, especially for low and moderate income. Did you come to any sort of conclusions during the campaign about how you'd like to see that move forward, or what you could do, the county could do to sort of improve that situation?
I mean, the county is on the track of wanting to develop more housing. There are a few developments already proposed, and I think we have planning documents that really lay out the need for more. I think we're just catching up to this problem where I don't think government was assertive enough in the identifying the land use and zoning kind of processes to move forward with housing and incentivizing the development of housing. And so we've seen skyrocketing costs of materials, a reduction in the construction sector, contracting firms and labor pool, and meanwhile, there was a little bit of a slow response policy-wise. So now we're in the place where we really need the political will to move forward with the plans we have. So there aren't really specific locations for developments that I have in mind, but I want to work with my colleagues and staff right away to work on pushing the envelope with housing a little bit. We've done that in the city of Eureka, and I think we'll start seeing the results in the next couple of years. We're already seeing the development where Myrtle and 7th meet, the Danco-led development on city property that's going to be quite a lot of units of low-income senior housing, so that's much needed in our community. So projects like that, I think, are a win-win, and I look forward to pushing them forward.
Rent prices are through the roof. I mean, how much control or how much help can the county be in terms of mitigating those costs? Is there anything to be done? I mean, more supply, right? But I mean, that's long term.
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly the possibility of rent control, and I think that's an issue I need to explore more to understand, what's in the county's purview and what would have to go to voters. But it's certainly something we can explore as a county. I think increasing supply is the biggest thing that we need to be doing, and I think government needs to take a hand. Like, some of those projects need to be led by government and not just incentivizing private business to do housing development, because right now private contractors just can't make ends meet with the kind of housing that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you're leaving the city council after a very storied and successful term, 2 terms actually. What do you feel like was your proudest accomplishment during the 8 years that you served there? And is there anything that you can bring over as sort of your passion to seed the board with? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a few proudest accomplishments. I do have a hard time picking one, so I hope you'll let me mention a few.
Have time.
Okay. So, our general plan and zoning code are in the slightly boring but very important category of documents that I think are really going to shape the way that Eureka looks in the coming years and the way that District 4 looks in the coming years. By that token, and I think as the county seat, we're really in the position to lead the way on forward-looking development patterns, and that's what I think we'll see in Eureka, and I'm really proud of that having happened on my watch.
When you say forward-looking development plans, what do you mean exactly?
I mean development that is more modern, somewhat denser infill development, really multifunctional.
Smart planning, sort of like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bringing together places where people need to shop and live into a relatively, walkable footprint. Those kinds of development patterns are, I think, how Eureka and Old Town and Downtown in particular, which are like the jewel of what people describe, this is like what Eureka is, right? When people think about Old Town, of course there's more to Eureka, but they really think of that as like the heart of the town. And that's very densely developed.
Absolutely,
and, looks much more urban. And I think people like that and respond to it. So I think we'll see more patterns like that spanning the rest of the town.
Okay, we have 90 seconds left, so if you got another thing you're proud of,
Sure,
what else?
I'm absolutely proud of the return of Tuluwat to the Wiyot tribe, and then the Eureka Chinatown project that we've been working on with the Asian Pacific Islander community. And it's not just Chinatown, it's expanded to include more involvement with the Asian Pacific Islander folks in the Humboldt County.
It often occurs to me, we have a minute left, that this Humboldt County has one of the biggest Native populations in the state of California, and it seems like it's a path not taken, really. I mean, we talk about our partnerships with the tribes in terms of the Klamath River and dam removal and other stuff, but it seems rather unexplored.
Yeah, there's a lot of relationships to build there, and I think projects to work on together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you joining us this evening, and congratulations on your apparent victory. We'll find out, but I'm pretty sure you're going to win. So you heard that from me. So.
All right, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. We'll be right back after this short break.
There's a whole life out there just waiting for you.
I think I don't actually give my therapist enough credit.
I know now that medication is necessary.
You think you can love it out of them, that will fix it. No, it doesn't.
People do overcome having a mental illness.
I am bipolar. This is okay. I'm just me. I started having sad thoughts around the end of 3rd grade.
At that age, how are you ever gonna admit I can't see past tomorrow?
It feels like you want to cry, but there's nothing there.
We all have stuff. We all have struggles.
People do overcome having a mental illness.
You're never alone, and you're gonna get through this.
That show looks amazing. Anyway, the news world exploded today just moments after the U.S. Supreme Court announced its decision to overturn Roe v. Wade this morning. People pointed fingers in every direction, outraged that something that had once seemed so impossible had actually come to pass. North Coast Congressman Jared Huffman summed up the mood by saying it was a sad day, but one that might finally spur the kind of political action necessary to make real and lasting change.
So, several dozen of my colleagues and I just marched to the Supreme Court to express our outrage over this Dobbs decision. We knew it was coming, but the reality of this and all of the implications for women, for where we're going as a country, really are sinking in. So people are struggling today. It's sad. It's outrageous. It's going to be tragic for millions of women in this country. And I hope today is a call to action.
Nancy Northup, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Reproductive Rights, which argued the pro-choice case in front of the Supreme Court, said that this day would long stain America's reputation in the world. As so many democracies are expanding their rights and protecting liberty, America appears to be backsliding, she said.
Roe versus Wade, it's clear, and the briefs that were filed before the court, including by leading economists across the nations, changed the arc of women's lives for the better, reducing maternal mortality and increasing educational and job opportunities. This decision is an affront to the rule of law. Its impact is going to reverberate beyond abortion, no matter what the majority tried to say about that, putting at risk constitutional protections for the use of contraception, intimate sexual relationships, and the right to marry, and other intensely personal decisions that people expect to be able to make for themselves under our Constitution and in a free society. And with today's decision, about half the states in the United States are likely to completely ban or severely curtail access to abortion. The center has been tracking what if Roe fell since 2004. 13 states have already passed trigger laws that purport and are designed to spring into effect within days or weeks of a case being overturned, Roe being overturned in the Supreme Court, it's going to leave vast swaths of the South and the Midwest without protection for abortion and forcing people to drive thousands of miles if they have the means to do so. Not all will have the means to do so, and it is not hyperbolic to say that they will be severely harmed. And we know that those who will be most harmed are those who have the biggest challenges to accessing health care to begin with. We know that half the people who seek abortions are living in poverty, and today's decision will fall hardest on them and others who already face economic and systemic barriers to health care, including communities of color, young people, LGBTQ plus communities, immigrants, and those in rural areas. And I want to underscore, because the Center for Reproductive Rights works around the world, and we have seen change and liberalization of abortion laws in recent years in places where it was thought impossible. And this elimination of abortion rights by the Supreme Court in the US Constitution makes the United States an outlier against this global trend. More than 60 countries have liberalized their abortion laws in the last 30 years since the court decided the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision. And the very few countries where we're seeing retrogression are those where democratic institutions have eroded. And it is shameful that the United States is joining that company.
A crowd gathered outside the Humboldt County Courthouse Friday evening tonight to protest the decision and vent the overwhelming frustration felt by so many. KEET contributor Ryan Hudson was on the scene and captured the following footage as scores of women and their allies protested the ruling. The images harken back to the Women's March of 2017, when hundreds and hundreds of local women took to the streets to protest the defeat of Hillary Clinton and the election of Donald Trump. Many of those folks back in 2017 warned that Trump's presidency would lead to a restriction of women's rights. While we took those warnings seriously, it nonetheless still comes as an unnerving shock today to actually see a constitutional right stripped away. Given the reasoning used by the conservative majority, many now fear that such logic could lead to further truncation of rights surrounding same-sex marriage and even birth control. Yes, birth control. Is this the America we've all come to love, or is it just the America we've come to deserve? That's all our time for this evening. I'd like to refer all of you to our podcast, Crossing the Bar. It's on every podcast service I think that you can come up with, whether it's Chatterbox and Juicebox and the Idiot Box, you know, all the ones. So you can look it up, Crossing the Bar. We've got 2 episodes up and a new one coming soon. So Jerry Rhodey and myself, we get at it. So thanks for joining us. Stay tuned, stay informed.